Good morning, Belvedere. Hope you're all having a wonderful day on this bright and sunny morning. There's been a lot of conversation about COVID, imagine that, and how it's changing our lives. And one of the major things that has come out in the last few days is how we're going to be able to continue to educate our children. I'm very pleased this morning to have Daniel Woestman, our superintendent of schools, here to share with you at home the decisions that needed to be made and why they were made and where we're going with this.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit to the community. A couple weeks ago, we shared with our community the plan to return back to school. Our initial plan was an in-person model where families could choose whether they wanted to send their child to school on a regular basis or if they wanted to learn remotely. We asked parents, and parents had the opportunity to make that decision, and about a third of our parents chose to keep their children home remotely. They were concerned with either their own health, somebody else's health in the household, or their child's health specifically. And so we worked for multiple weeks to try to figure out the operations and logistics to bring about 2/3 of our students back into the school. At that point, all of our elementary school students were offered to come every day, all day, and our secondary students, our middle school and high school students, would have come 2 days a week and then learn from home the other 3 days a week. Just recently, in the last couple days, after we've gone through all that planning, we realized that we needed to pivot our decision and just start the year out in an all-remote fashion. We're joining about 150 other districts in the state at this point that have made that decision. And the decision is made mostly because of health and safety regulations and restrictions that we are not comfortable being able to start the school following. There are a lot of really important health and safety regulations that we've received from the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Illinois State Board of Education. And I've had a really great team that includes administrators and educators and teachers working on figuring out how we can implement those regulations and requirements. And this last week we realized that the amount of time that we were spending trying to work on getting students back in person was starting to have a diminishing effect on returns because the likelihood of us being able to keep all students in school that had chosen to be in school, given quarantine and other health and safety requirements that are being given to us from the State Board of Education, were unrealistic for us to expect to be in school for any great length period of time. And so just making the decision to pivot at this point, I think, helps us best use our time to prepare teachers to instruct in what most likely is going to be the situation that I believe we would find ourselves in at some point during the year, which is a virtual environment. So we pushed back the start date for school. School will start on September 8th. It's the Tuesday after Labor Day. This gives us 3 extra weeks for planning, allows us to do significant, intense training with our teachers so that they can be best equipped for teaching in a virtual environment. Had we not made this shift, my worry was that we would have spent the majority of our training time with teachers on health and safety protocol just to get the students in school. And while that would have been important and worthwhile to try to bring students back to school, it would have been prohibitive in terms of training teachers to teach in a remote or virtual environment, which most likely all of our teachers and all of our students would have been found themselves in at some point for some number of days during the school year. So our plan currently, and unfortunately everything just keeps shifting, and expectations change, and our plans we're trying to change and be responsive to those needs. Our plan currently is to start school on September 8th and be in a remote environment for the first quarter. Our hope is that the safety and health restrictions will be easier met than by the end of the first quarter, and we'll be able to contemplate coming back in person, at least for those families that will then choose to send their children back. We will continue throughout the year to have a remote option available for all families that choose that. And so as we shift, hopefully in the future, to more of an in-person model, that option to stay remote will still be available for families. Some of the things that we're working through right now as we've shifted our planning is how we educate students that have really high specific unique needs. We have students that have special education programming that are have a lot of needs that need to be met by an educator or a professional in the school. So we're targeting a little less than 100 students that receive really targeted special education services throughout the day to try to see if we can bring those students to learn in person. We're also targeting students that have really significant English language needs because their needs are unique and individual, and trying to determine if there's ways that we can service them in person. Another significant thing that we're working through as far as details and planning is internet access. We recognize that there are a lot of families in our community that don't have internet access that allows their child to be online for a good period of time during the day using a Chromebook. Last year when we had remote learning, we had students 3rd grade through 12th grade that were given a Chromebook. We've expanded that so all students kindergarten through 12th grade will have a Chromebook that's issued to them by the school district. And while most families have access to the internet, not necessarily always through Wi-Fi connection where the cable is coming to their home, but maybe through a phone, even like that they can use as a hotspot as needed. The ability for a good handful of families to rely on a phone hotspot for internet access consistently and consecutively for a child is low for many of our families. So we're investigating ways that we can improve internet access for our families and give them opportunities to access Wi-Fi that may not be in their home but is available in the community. In the spring we had to do that mostly through hotspots that were available in parking lots, but we're going to work on a better option for that. And so taking the next 3 weeks to plan and figure out the procedures that we needed to go through for that is another reason why we're trying to make the shift now preemptively and push back our start date. We are hoping that athletics will continue. The Illinois High School Association has put out a modified athletic schedule for the year. So most of the contact sports have been pushed back to the spring. So fall sports right now include boys and girls cross country, boys and girls golf, girls swimming, and tennis. And so those athletic opportunities are still available for students. They're outside. You're able to social distance in that environment, and it's an optional thing that families can choose to be a part of. We're hoping that the Illinois High School Association continues to allow schools to run those different programs, and they've pushed the rest of the sports back, and school athletics are now 4 seasons. There's 4 seasons in the athletics for the entire state. So hopefully things like football will still be able to happen later in the year after we get through the winter weather. Let's see. What other questions do you have, Mayor? Maybe you can help me with some questions here.
I think I was waiting to see if you covered the athletic thing because I get a lot of phone calls about that. And can kids participate if they're not starting school at a normal time? And I said, you know, we're very lucky because the superintendent's going to be here tomorrow and talk to us directly. So appreciate that. I think from our perspective, the challenge of getting everybody hooked up to a significant source for their Wi-Fi or for broadband, if the city can be of help with that, this is a big issue, and as you probably know, I'm on the governor's broadband committee, and we're constantly looking at opportunities. They are going to be issuing another series of grants. I don't know if you guys applied for a grant this last time. I think you did, and got one for planning. And so we'll know fairly soon when that next series comes, and if we can team up with you in any way to help the educational outreach or anything that you need from us, just holler and we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mayor. Internet access is definitely a big part of the conversation here in the community, and it's not necessarily just for families that have chosen not to have internet or maybe can't afford internet. It's also for families that just don't have access. So there are many areas in our school district where families would like to have reliable access. They're willing to pay for reliable access, but it's not available to them. So we're trying to think through different creative ways that we can support them in that. I would say something that I recognize is that the decision to start the school year out in an all-remote situation I recognize is very much a burden for many families who regularly rely on the fact that public schools provide a safe place for their children to be at in order to fulfill family obligations, personal obligations, or work obligations. And I don't have a good answer, to be honest, for families that are in that situation. Recognize and agree that this is very difficult for a lot of families that now are in a situation where they don't know what to do for childcare. They might be a single parent home, or but where both parents are working, and they have some significant hurdles to get over. My hope is that by providing those community members multiple weeks of notice, that they will better be able to prepare for having their children learn in an all virtual environment, as opposed to the likelihood later in the year of us, if we had started in person, needing to pivot and saying, hey, in 3 days we're starting all virtual. So hopefully this provides the most consistent opportunity for parents to plan for what really is a horrible situation across the country.
And to that note about the child care, I had an extensive conversation with Jen Jackie from the Y. I've talked to Mark from the park. He was here last Friday with Rick, and looking at options of them, the park expanding their child care, and that Jen will expand hers as far as the limits can be expanded. So it's good that we have this time period to explore all of those options, and I know they're working on some things with you about accessing maybe one of the elementary schools and so forth. So the community's hard at work together to try to solve this problem. COVID keeps surprising us with things, and so we have to kind of roll with the punches. But I'm very proud of this community and how we've all come together to try to deal with these challenges. And it's very hard to pick up the phone when you know there are things that we can't solve yet. But I will say we're working real hard on them, and I've just been really appreciative of all the work that you and your team have done to try to deal with all of this in a reasonable, safe way to make sure our kiddos are okay and to try to serve the community as a whole.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Again, our start date has been pushed back to September 8th. It's the Tuesday after Labor Day. Families can expect that on the Friday before, which I believe is the 4th, that they'll receive that final information about the teachers that their child has been assigned to and expectations for that first week. And then they should expect to, on Tuesday, early in the morning, when school would start, log in and have that first virtual experience with their teacher. In the coming weeks, we'll be explaining to parents where they can pick up the Chromebook if they don't have a Chromebook already. The majority of our students took their Chromebooks home, and we kept them at the homes in the spring, given the likelihood that we might be looking at this type of scenario. So our middle school and high school students, most of them should have a Chromebook, but for our elementary students, they'll get information on where to pick up their Chromebook in the coming weeks. Thank you very much.
Thanks for taking time this morning. I know how busy your schedule is. Well, again, we're very appreciative that Dan could come this morning and share with us a couple of things before we sign off. The census is winding down. They moved the date back, actually, to end in September instead of October. It's very important that everybody get signed up for the census, because it's millions of dollars to us ongoing over the next 10 years to help us deal with emergency situations like this. So if you haven't, there's so many ways to do it. You can call here at the City Hall and ask for Gina Del Rose. She's heading our census effort. You can go online and sign up, but please get signed up. Also, please wear a mask. The governor's new set of rules are important. Wear a mask, whether you agree with it or not. Wash your hands. Be considerate of other folks, because what we don't want to have happen is the problem to build here, so we have to shut everything down again. Winnebago County is approaching that level at this point. We are watching things. There is some interest in what's going on at the FCA plant. Amanda Merrill from the Health Department. They're working with FCA to make sure that they can handle whatever comes up out there. To my knowledge, at this point, it hasn't amounted to a major issue. But this is a community issue. We're all in this together, and working together, we will get through it. This has not been the best year in our lives, but we'll look back on this and look at ways that the world changed that actually maybe made families closer together and made us communicate better as leaders in the community. I appreciate all of you. We are doing our best to serve you to the best that we possibly can and keep everybody safe. So for now, this is Mayor Mike signing off. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.